This video will show you how to perform date calculations. You can perform date calculations both at the dataset level and at the dashboard level. To create a date calculation at the dataset level, press the Data tab at the top and then find the dataset on which you want to perform the calculation. In this case, we'll add the calculation to a dataset called Sales Explore. To open the dataset for editing, simply click on the dataset itself. This opens the dataset in a data worksheet. This data worksheet contains a dataset called Sales Mirror, which contains detail information for a set of orders. To perform a date calculation, you'll create an expression column on the dataset. To do this, press the FX button or Create Expression button in the title bar of the dataset. In this case, we would like to create a new expression column that contains dates, where each date is 30 days prior to the corresponding date in the existing date column. We can name this column 30 days prior. This opens the formula editor, where you can write the desired expression. Note that you can write the expression using either SQL syntax that your database understands or using JavaScript syntax. In general, a SQL expression will yield better performance because the database can process the expression very rapidly, while JavaScript is generally more flexible and easier to write. In this case, we will write the expression using JavaScript. We will use a JavaScript function called dateAdd. You can find this function in the global folder of the functions list. The dateAdd function takes three parameters: an interval that determines the interval of counting, days, months, or years, an amount, the number of days, months, or years to count, and a date from which to count. First, remove the existing formula from the text box and then click to add the dateAdd function into the expression. In this case, we want to count 30 days into the past from the order date, so the first parameter will be a D in quotes, indicating that we wish to count in terms of days. The second parameter will be the number of days that we want to count, -30, indicating 30 days into the past. The third parameter is the date from which we want to count, the order date, which we can add to the expression by selecting it from the fields list. This JavaScript expression will return a date 30 days prior to the date in the sales date column. Press OK to save the expression. The dataset now contains a new column where the date in each row of the column represents a date 30 days prior to the corresponding date in the date column. To save the dataset with the new expression column, press the Save button in the toolbar. You can also perform date calculations at the dashboard level. In this case, we'd like to add a date column to the table that contains a date 1 month or 30 days following the date in the date column. To do this, create a new calculated field. Right-click on the dataset that is being used by the table and select New Calculated Field. Select the Detail option and then provide a name for the new calculated field. Return Deadline. Press OK to open the formula editor. The expression that we'll write here is very similar to the expression that we created previously. Again, we can choose to write either using SQL or JavaScript syntax, and here we'll choose the JavaScript option. Again, the function we need to use here is the dateAdd function, which you can enter either by selecting it in the functions list or by simply beginning to type the name of the function. Again, here we'll count in terms of days, so the first parameter is a D in quotes. This time we wish to count 30 days into the future, so the second parameter will be the number 30. And again, we want to count from the order date, so we'll enter the order date field by selecting it in the fields list. This expression will return a date 30 days past the order date. Press OK to create the calculated field. The new calculated field will now be listed as part of the dataset. Keep in mind, though, that this calculated field only exists within the context of this particular dashboard. To add the new calculated field into the table, simply drag the field into the table as you would for any other field. Resize the table if needed, and then format the dates by right-clicking on one of the date values and selecting the Format option. Then choose the date format and select the desired date format, or enter your own custom date format using the special codes. Press OK to apply the format. The return deadline column contains dates that are 30 days past each order date. Now let's create an additional calculated field that will give us the elapsed time in years from the original order date until today's date. To do this, again, right-click on the dataset to which you want to add the calculated field and select Calculated Field. Then choose the Detail option and enter a name for the new calculated field. In this case, years elapsed. Press OK to open the formula editor. To calculate the years elapsed, we'll use a function called dateDiff. This can also be found in the global folder of the functions list. The dateDiff function takes an interval, again, days, months, or years, and two dates, a starting date and an ending date. Add the function into the formula. For the first parameter, specify YYYY in quotes, indicating that the interval we want to count in terms of is years. Then add the start date, which is given to us by the date field. Again, you can insert this by clicking on the field name from the fields list. And for the third parameter, the ending date, we'll insert today's date, which is given to us by a function called calc.today. This expression will return the number of years that have elapsed from the original order date until today. Press OK to save the formula. This creates a new calculated field, which is again available as a field in the dataset, but exists only within the scope of this particular dashboard. Drag the years elapsed field into the table to create a new column as you ordinarily would. The new column displays the number of years that have elapsed from the original order date until today's date. The next thing we'd like to do is add today's date at the top of the dashboard, where the string reads today's date is. There are a couple of ways to do this. The first approach is simply to add another text element. We can enter some dummy text into this text element, and then to use a JavaScript expression to set the contents of the text element. To do this, right-click on the text element and select Properties. We have two options here for creating the calculation that will set the text element to display today's date. We can add a calculation to the text field, or we can add a calculation under the Script tab at the top. In this case, we'll add the expression to the text field under the General tab. To do this, press the pop-up button at the right side of the text field and select Expression. Then press the Edit button. This opens the formula editor where we can write the expression that will set the contents of the text element to today's date. Here again, we can use the calc.today JavaScript function to provide today's date. Press OK to save the expression. The text element now displays today's date, but note that the date includes also the time. To display the date in a desired format, right-click on the text element and select Format, and then choose the Date option and select a date format as you normally would for any date field. You can size and format this text element the same way that you would for any other text element. In some cases, you might prefer to add today's date to the existing text element that reads today's date is. To do this, remove the text element that we just added, and instead we'll write an expression on the existing text element that reads today's date is. To do this, select Properties to open the Properties dialog box for the text element. And again, here we can use the text property of the text element, or we can use the Script tab at the top. In this case, we'll use the Script tab. The expression that we want to write here is text equals text plus calc.today. The text property is a property of the text element and contains the contents of the text element. So the expression that we are writing here takes the existing contents of the text element, concatenates those contents using the plus operator or JavaScript concatenation operator with today's date, which is again provided by calc.today. The result of the concatenation is assigned back to the text property of the text element, thus setting a new contents for the text element. The new contents will read today's date is, followed by the actual date of today, provided by calc.today. Now you can see here that there are a couple of improvements that we could make. First of all, we'd like a space following the word is and before the date, and we'd also like to format the date, which currently is displaying, again, the time as well. Note that the asterisk on the text element indicates that this text element contains a script. To format the date in this case, we cannot use the format dialog box as we did previously because this date is part of a larger string. So right-click on the text element and select Properties again. So we'll add the required space before the date and then use a JavaScript function called formatDate to format the date using script. The formatDate function takes a date and a format specification. The format specification uses the codes that we've seen previously for date formats to format the date as desired. In this case, we'd like to format the date using a 2-digit month, 2-digit day, and 4-digit year. This expression will concatenate the existing text in the text element with today's date, formatted as desired, and assign the result back to the same text element. The last thing that we'd like to do on this dashboard is to use the radio button at the top right to set the end date for the data displayed in the table. In other words, if the user selects 2012 as the end date, then the records in the table should only include orders through 2012. Now keep in mind that the easiest way to allow the user to select a range of dates is by using a range slider selection component. This is easy enough to add to the dashboard by simply dragging the date field onto the dashboard to create the range slider. The user can then select the end date for the dates shown in any dashboard component that is based on the dataset, such as this table. However, in some cases you may prefer to use an alternative interface such as the radio button that we have here. In this case, we can allow the user to filter the table by applying a condition to the table and using the radio button to set the parameters of the condition. To apply the condition, right-click on the table and select Condition. The condition that we want to add here is that the date is between a starting date, which we can set statically to be the beginning of the year 2011, and an ending date that will be set using the value the user selects from the radio button. To do this, press the pop-up button to the right of the ending date and select Expression. Click on the Sequel button to switch the expression to JavaScript syntax. Then press the FX button. This opens the formula editor. Here we will write an expression that will return a date corresponding to the end of the year that the user selects. Note that since the user is not selecting a date, but rather just the year, we will need to construct the date object. We will do this using the year that the user supplies, and then the last month of the year and the last day of the month. We can do this using a constructor function called date. The date constructor can take a year, a month, and a day to produce the new date object. The year will be provided by the value that the user selects in the radio button. To access this value, you can either find the radio button listed in the component list. The name of the radio button is Sales Through, and in the list of properties for the Sales Through radio button, find the Selected Object property. This will provide the value that the user selects in the radio button. An equivalent approach is to expand the parameter listing and find the name of the radio button in the parameter listing. Again, the name of the radio button is Sales Through. In this case, we'll use this second approach. Click on the Sales Through parameter to add it into the expression. This provides the year that the user selected. Next, we need to enter the index of the month, keeping in mind that the months are indexed from 0, and hence December, the last month of the year, is index 11. Finally, we'll enter the last day of the month, or 31. This expression will create a new date object that returns the last day of the year for the year that the user selects in the radio button. Press OK to save the formula, which is now used to set the ending date for the condition. Press OK to save the condition. Verify that by selecting different option in the Sales Through radio button, you can select different ranges of data in the table.